Tonight, let's follow the daily miracle that once occurred in every city and town, the creation of a newspaper, from gathering news to the paper landing on your doorstep before breakfast. For over a century, newspapers were the primary way people learned about their world. Every day, armies of reporters, editors, typesetters, pressmen, and delivery workers labored to produce morning and evening editions. The rhythm of this work shaped communities and created a shared experience of news. Let's trace how newspapers were made, from the first story to the final delivery. The newsroom. The newspaper office was a place of controlled chaos, especially as deadline approached. The newsroom occupied the heart of the operation. Rows of desks held reporters working on typewriters, the clatter of keys creating constant background noise. Editors reviewed copy, marking corrections. Messengers moved between desks carrying stories and assignments. The city desk coordinated local coverage. The city editor assigned reporters to beats, the regular sources and locations they covered. Some reporters covered City Hall, others the police, still others the courts. Beat reporters knew their territory intimately. The wire services brought national and international news. Teletype machines chattered constantly, printing stories from correspondents around the world. The wire editor selected which stories would run and how prominently. Special sections had their own editors and reporters, sports, society, business, features. Each department produced content for its section. The newspaper was actually many publications combined. Getting the story reporting began with finding out what was happening. Beat reporters cultivated sources. A police reporter knew officers and detectives. A city hall reporter knew politicians and clerks. These relationships yielded tips and information that shaped coverage. Breaking news sent reporters scrambling. A fire, a crime, an accident. Reporters raced to the scene, gathered information, and phoned or returned to the office to write. The pressure was immediate. Deadline waited for no one. Interviews were conducted in person or by telephone. Reporters asked questions, took notes, and assembled facts into stories. The skill lay in getting information quickly and accurately. Investigation took longer. Some stories required days or weeks of digging. Reporters followed leads, examined documents, and built complex stories piece by piece. These projects produced some of journalism's finest work. Writing and editing stories were written to strict formulas and tighter deadlines. The inverted pyramid structure put the most important information first. This wasn't just good writing, it was practical. If the story had to be cut for space, the least important information at the end could be dropped. Reporters typed their stories on copy paper, often in multiple carbon copies. The originals went to editors, carbons went to various departments. The typewriter's clatter filled newsrooms hour after hour. Editors improved copy and caught errors. They tightened prose, verified facts, and ensured stories met the paper's standards. A good editor could salvage weak writing. A great editor could make good writing better. The copy desk performed final review. Copy editors checked grammar, spelling, and style. They wrote headlines that had to fit precisely in allocated space while conveying the story's essence. The craft of headline writing was demanding and underappreciated. Into the composing room, edited copy moved to the composing room, where words became metal type. Linotype machines dominated composing rooms for most of the 20th century. Operators sat at keyboards, typing stories letter by letter. The machine assembled brass matrices for each character, cast a line of type in molten lead, and returned the matrices for reuse. The linotype operator was a skilled craftsman. Speed mattered. Accuracy mattered more. A mistake meant recasting the line. Good operators produced clean copy quickly, essential when deadlines loomed. The lines of type, called slugs, accumulated in long metal trays called galleys. Proofreaders compared the galleys against original copy, marking errors for correction. Even with skilled operators, mistakes slipped through. Corrections required setting new lines and substituting them for the flawed ones. The lead type was heavy, the work was physical as well as mental. The composing room was hot from the molten metal and noisy from the machines. Making up the pages. Individual stories had to be assembled into complete pages, a process called makeup. The makeup editor worked from a layout showing what would appear where on each page. Advertising space was sold first. News filled around it. The front page had the most prominent stories. Inside pages mixed news, features, and ads. Compositors assembled the pages on steel tables called stones. They placed type, headlines, and spacing material according to the layout. Getting everything to fit precisely required adjustments. Cutting a story here, adding a filler there. Photographs required special handling. Images were converted to metal printing plates through photo engraving. The halftone process translated continuous tones into patterns of dots that could be printed. The plates locked into the page alongside the type. When a page was complete, it was locked into a metal frame called a chase. This unit could now move to the stereotyping department. The clock kept running toward deadline, stereotyping. The composed pages couldn't go directly onto the rotary presses. An intermediate step converted flat type into curved plates. A mat or matrix was made by pressing the page of type into a thick papier-mâché material. This mat captured an impression of everything on the page in reverse. The mat went into a casting machine. Molten metal poured over the mat, filling every letter and line. When cooled, the result was a curved metal plate that exactly reproduced the original page but could wrap around a press cylinder. Stereotyping allowed multiple plates from a single page. A big press might need dozens of identical plates to print enough copies. The mats also allowed editions to be sent to other printing locations. The stereotype plates were heavy and awkward. Workers handled them with care. Dropping a plate could damage it and delay the press run. The foundry area, with its molten metal and heavy equipment, demanded caution. The press room. The presses were the industrial heart of the newspaper operation. Rotary presses printed newspapers at tremendous speeds. Giant cylinders carried the printing plates. Paper fed through in continuous webs that could be hundreds of feet long. A big press could produce tens of thousands of papers per hour. The pressmen were specialized craftsmen. They mounted plates, adjusted ink flow, monitored paper tension, and maintained the complex machinery. When something went wrong, they had to fix it fast. The deadline didn't pause for mechanical problems. The noise was tremendous. Presses in operation produced a roar that required workers to communicate by hand signals. The floor vibrated. The air smelled of ink and paper. This was heavy industry producing a product measured in hours rather than days. Papers emerged from the press, folded and counted. Conveyor systems moved the product toward the loading docks. The transformation from composed page to printed paper happened in minutes. Thousands of copies accumulated rapidly. Distribution printed papers had to reach readers across the city before the news became stale. Loading docks received stacks of papers from the press room. Trucks waited to carry bundles to distribution points throughout the city. The timing was precise. Late trucks meant late papers. Newsboys sold papers on street corners, shouting headlines to attract buyers. This iconic figure of American journalism was often a child, earning money through hustle and persistence. The best corners were valuable. Competition for them was fierce. Home delivery brought papers to subscribers' doorsteps. Delivery routes were divided among carriers who learned their territories through repetition. Papers had to arrive before subscribers left for work. Early mornings defined the job. Newsstands sold papers to passers-by. Strategic locations, train stations, busy corners, building lobbies, captured customers on their daily journeys. The newsstand was both retail outlet and community fixture. The daily rhythm. The newspaper day had its own rhythm, repeated constantly. Morning papers worked overnight. Reporters filed stories through the evening. Editors closed pages late at night. The presses ran in the small hours. Papers reached readers with breakfast. Evening papers reversed the schedule. Reporters started early. Presses ran in the afternoon. These papers competed with morning editions, often covering the same stories with updated information. Multiple editions allowed updates through the day. An early edition might carry breaking news. A later edition could add developments. The edition structure let papers stay current as stories evolved. For the workers, this meant irregular hours. Night shifts, early mornings, and unpredictable breaking news disrupted normal schedules. The newspaper life was demanding, but those who loved it wouldn't have traded it. The People newspapers employed armies of workers with varied skills. Reporters ranged from raw beginners to seasoned veterans. The best developed reputations that followed them throughout careers. Some became famous. Most labored in anonymity, their bylines forgotten. Editors shaped the paper's voice and coverage. The managing editor coordinated everything. Department editors handled their domains. Copy editors polished every story. The editorial hierarchy determined what readers would see. The mechanical trades, typesetters, pressmen, stereotypers, had their own culture. Strong unions protected their members. Apprenticeships trained newcomers in craft skills. The craft workers took pride in their essential role. Support workers kept everything running. Secretaries typed and filed. Librarians maintained the morgue of clippings. Maintenance workers cleaned and repaired. The newspaper was a community as well as a business. Technology changes. The process described was already changing by mid-century and would transform completely by century's end. Phototypesetting replaced hot metal. Stories were photographed onto film rather than cast in lead. The composing room grew quieter. The heavy machinery disappeared. Offset printing replaced letterpress. Pages were photographed onto plates that printed through a different process. Quality improved. Flexibility increased. Computers revolutionized everything. Reporters typed on terminals rather than typewriters. Stories flowed electronically rather than on paper. Pagination systems allowed pages to be composed on screen. The Internet eventually challenged the fundamental business model. Advertising migrated online. Subscribers canceled. Newspapers that had thrived for generations struggled or closed. The industry that had seemed permanent proved as mortal as any other. What newspapers were beyond the mechanics, newspapers served functions that matter beyond the technology. They created community awareness. What happened at City Hall, in the courts, on the streets, the newspaper told people what they needed to know. Communities depended on this information to function. They provided shared experience. Everyone read the same paper. Everyone knew the same news. The common reference point created conversation and connection. They held power accountable. Investigative journalism exposed corruption, incompetence, and injustice. The threat of exposure restrained those who might otherwise misbehave. This watchdog function served democracy. They recorded history. The newspaper of any given day captured that day's events for future reference. Historians still use old newspapers to understand the past. The morning paper. Imagine the newspaper arriving on a doorstep decades ago. Someone worked through the night to put those pages together. The ink smells fresh. The paper crackles when unfolded. Today's date appears at the top, and below it, everything that happened yesterday that an editor thought you should know. The front page leads with the biggest story. Inside, the city section, the sports section, the business pages, each offers its own world of information. Comics provide humor. Editorials express opinions. Advertisements offer goods and services. This physical object, appearing reliably every morning, connected people to their world. The ritual of reading with breakfast, on the commute, during lunch, structured daily life. That ritual has mostly passed. But for generations, the morning paper was how people knew their world. ink, and paper. The presses are mostly silent now. The newsrooms have shrunk. The delivery trucks no longer wake neighborhoods at dawn. But the work that newspapers did, informing communities, watching power, recording events, continues in different forms. The need hasn't disappeared, only the medium has changed. And as you drift towards sleep, imagine an old newspaper office late at night, the presses beginning to roll, the building trembling slightly with their vibration, papers flowing out to be bundled and loaded and delivered to doorsteps across the city. Tomorrow's news, becoming today's paper, about to enter the world. Rest well.